Hi. I found this amongst some things that I inherited from my friend Barbara, who passed away. And while I'm going through files and folders and organizing things, um, I wanted to read this. I thought it might be timely. And it isn't just a romantic situation. So I haven't read very any of it, just very little, opened it up to sort of one sentence here and there, but thought we would read it together. So it's called Intimacy, and it's produced by the Hazelden Foundation, which is known for their work with 12 Steps. About the pamphlet, what is intimacy? And why do we often feel confused and frightened about it? In this pamphlet, Dr. Mason explains how we experience intimacy and how we can improve our relationships. And then there's some information about the author. I tried to find that online, but couldn't. So this is from 1986, year I graduated high school, giving away my age. Printed in the United States. And we're going to start page 1, Intimacy. Just what is this mystery known as intimacy? Why has such an essential life-enhancing experience been met with fears and timidity? Surely intimacy is closeness, contact, tenderness, and affection. Then why do we feel so confused and frightened when we face the experience of intimacy? Let's look at some definitions of intimacy and explore some new ways of being together. By acknowledging our fears, we can broaden our expressions of intimacy. Intimacy defined. Intimacy is a most ill-defined and sought-after experience. While the Oxford Dictionary defines intimacy as having a close acquaintance or friendship with a person, its second meaning states having a sexual relationship with a person, especially outside marriage. Since language reflects our culture, it is not surprising so many people accept the idea that being intimate implies being sexual. How limiting this definition is. How can we work on developing intimacy with anyone but one person when it means sexual closeness? My definition for intimacy is being connected and close through shared contact in a variety of activities that are informal, deep, and personal. This definition usually means closeness with another person, but can also be experienced in a variety of ways. For example, some people experience intimacy with pets or quiet places such as gardens or wilderness areas. Both the deep warmth and the personal nature of the experience determines the intimacy. We can increase our awareness of our expectations of intimacy when we explore the concept and acknowledge what it is to us. Intimacy is a process. We all share the struggle for intimacy. We need intimacy to survive. Without it, we could not exist. Intimacy is not an outcome or something we achieve. Intimacy is a process. It is not static, but active and recurring. Our ability to experience intimate relationships is crucial to our becoming adults. I'll read that last sentence again. Our ability to experience intimate relationships is crucial to our becoming adults. Our needs for intimacy change at different stages of our lives. A baby's needs differ greatly from the needs of someone who is 40 years old. While needs change, this process continues to evolve during our entire lifespan. For people in recovery from drug dependency, intimate relationships can be terrifying. For many of us, establishing intimate relationships was blocked when we used drugs, food, work, or suffered other compulsive behaviors. We avoided closeness with our own feelings and thoughts, as well as closeness with others, because we feared to risk and be known. Intimacy can be elusive. When we have experienced intimacy, we have learned to know it in a specific way, with a certain person, place, or activity. This familiarity can be deceptive because it can lead us to believe we actually possess intimacy, like a thing or commodity. We cannot force intimacy. We can shape it or make it happen. In fact, an intimate experience just happens. Picasso said, "We don't seek it, we find it." Let me tell you about the lost keys story. I have carried my keys in the pocket of my handbag for years. I knew just where my keys were. The habit was established. One day, when I reached into my bag, I could not find them. I was stunned. My keys must be here. I always keep them here. I searched my home and then explored the familiar pocket again. Then I searched some more, returning once again to my bag pocket, muttering, "I know they're here. I always keep them here." After 4 returns to the pocket, I finally acknowledged it's empty. They just aren't here. My belief in what I had learned to be true was so strong, I was reluctant to admit I would have to look in another place. So it is with intimacy. We often learn to know it in given ways and want to cling to the familiar, resisting the obvious task of looking elsewhere. This is the illusory quality of intimacy. Now we think we have it, now we don't. Learning about intimacy. Many of us have felt isolated in our struggle for intimacy, thinking we are inadequate in connecting with others. Yet, we are not at fault. Many things have shaped our images of intimacy. This has resulted in our adopting myths about it and what it should be like. In our rapidly changing technological society, we have turned our morals over to the church, our sex education over to the schools, and our expressiveness over to Hallmark cards. We have depended on direction from outside sources rather than looking within ourselves. Our media has helped establish our myths about intimacy. Advertisements selling cigarettes and liquors are also selling intimacy. Just consider all the billboards and magazine advertisements with their romanticized images, physically attractive people with their drug of choice and a partner. The message is, drink this or smoke this, and you too can be loved. It is quite easy to feel inadequate in this imaginary world of advertising. Many people have mimicked the images by dressing in the latest fashions or driving the newest cars, but the result is often empty people with a good image on the outside. They have learned to act as if, and yet realize something is missing. Many people have become quite skilled in apparent intimacy, even adopting the appropriate language. But these same people often admit they have not known real intimacy. When people have grown up in alcoholic families, they might not have learned about closeness since many family members were quite lonely and isolated. A relationship to addiction blocks relationships to people. It is easy to see why people turn to outside models for intimacy. Many people have learned that if they disagreed or fought openly with people, it damaged or ended their relationships. Many people in alcoholic families grew up experiencing shame. They were criticized, teased, or blamed when they were showing vulnerable feelings, loneliness, hurt, inadequacy. They learned to put up defenses to protect these tender human feelings. They believed that you shouldn't cry. You shouldn't be such a baby. Such breaks in human contact result in family members defending themselves to survive. When we don't feel safe with others, we soon learn not to express our true selves to others. One woman reported that if she expressed her true feelings, her parents would humiliate her and her siblings would tease her with sarcasm and name-calling. In her shame and low self-worth, she turned to others as experts on how to connect with people. In many alcoholic families, connection has been accomplished through antagonism and hostility. Many people learn to feel connected to one another through disrespect and shame. These very powerful and familiar patterns form the style for the relationships in the family. The patterns of shaming and blaming can be the only ways some people know they matter to one another. One man said he could always count on some personal response from his parents when he got in trouble at school. He said that at least it was better than being ignored. He thought this was normal, and all families were like this. He never thought of discussing his loneliness with anyone, and drinking was the way he learned to fill the void. What he described as connecting was not intimacy. Intimacy requires relationship. In these examples, we can see how environment shapes our potential for intimacy. While these shaming patterns are surely harmful, not all anger is negative. In fact, there is a paradox here. If we are going to be in a healthy relationship, we will have some conflicts and disappointments that result in hurt, anger, and suffering. If we don't cut ourselves off because of angry or upset feelings, we can allow more of our humanness to be seen, deepening the intimacy in our relationships. We trust the people involved will not leave us, but will stay to work it through. Since our families are filled with potential for intimacy, how well we have learned to develop it depends on the modeling we had in our early growing years. Without positive modeling, we learned many ways to avoid closeness. Early in life, we learn about rules for closeness, which behaviors to follow or express. These rules are never said out loud. They are the implied rules that govern our behaviors. For example, in one family, we might see mother and dad kiss each other goodnight and upon leaving the house. In other families, children never see any outward displays of affection. Whatever rules we observe, we learn the patterns our families followed. It is common to hear someone raised in an alcoholic family say, in our family, it was just a rule that you never openly expressed any feelings of vulnerability. It wasn't that anyone ever said, don't do this, but rather what was observed. These observations develop into rules, which often govern our adult relationships. These are often operating at an unconscious, habitual level. We continue what we have learned. Rules and roles for avoiding closeness. In order to learn about connecting with one another in healthy ways, we must first examine the rules we have learned to avoid closeness. The following is a checklist for assessing rules you might want to break. 1. Always say you or it instead of I. If someone says something personal to you, joke about it or laugh. 3. Try to maintain topical discussions. Talk about safe subjects like weather, sports, scores, current events, where little personal disclosure is made. The language is usually in the form of it or they. 4. If someone takes a risk with you, ignore it or change the subject. If someone states they like something you did or they want to get to know you better, do not acknowledge they're reaching out to you. 5. If you like someone, tell another person instead of the one you like. Be indirect. 6. Never talk openly with a family member or close friend about your relationship with him or her, especially if you are alone together. 7. Avoid being alone with another person. Escape any opportunities for closeness. If you are alone, bring up another person or cause to talk about. 8. Don't disclose any strong feelings of loving, caring, loneliness, sadness, or fear. Never acknowledge any pain from your past. Keep it secret. 10. Protect yourself from who you really are. Turn to others to define yourself. Fulfill others' expectations of you, not your own. 11. Don't risk being vulnerable or unprotected. If you hear about someone's vulnerability, be sure to gossip to others about it or store it to use against the person at a later time for revenge. 12. Stay busy. Fill up with chatter, booze, food, work, and things. You won't have to feel lonely. These rules are guaranteed to avoid closeness. Do you know what rules govern your relationships with others? In addition to these rules for avoiding closeness, people also turn to their roles. By seeking our identities through roles, we can feel secure since roles have prescribed behaviors. For example, when we go to a doctor, we have certain role expectations to be examined, heard, and diagnosed, but our roles can also insulate us from others. We can learn how to hide as mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, sisters, brothers, counselors, ministers, secretaries, and plumbers. We can also learn to perform our roles to the best of our ability and learn to feel comfortable in the security they provide. Roles provide a sense of belonging to a larger group, fulfilling some closeness needs. We need our roles, but beyond our roles, we are people. It is as people that we know intimacy, what it means to be who as well as what we are. Our roles cannot connect us. People connect with each other. When people invest most of their energy in performing their roles, they also avoid the vulnerability of being exposed and being out of control with others. Many learn to identify themselves primarily with their roles, avoiding the vulnerability and allowing themselves to just be. People feel appreciated in their roles and like the self-worth and good feelings they get, but they can feel quite inadequate in their intimate relationships. They learn to value comments like, "do wonderful work," rather than, "I appreciate your relationship with me." Our roles can become screens between us and others. Although we need to act out our roles, we must take down these screens so others can see us as we really are. Allowing the person inside to be known is essential to being intimate. The roots of intimacy. In order to branch out and connect with others, we need a solid root system. These roots of identity, trust, self-esteem, self-awareness, and knowledge of our needs, desires, and capacity for assertiveness all contribute to our ability to experience and grow in intimacy. Finding identity through boundaries. Without clear identities, we are limited in our capacity for intimacy. Having an identity means we have a clear idea of our own selves. When our identities are fully formed, we rely on and make judgments based on our individual thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. This identity is formed by developing boundaries, by developing solid boundaries. By boundaries, we refer to the invisible shield surrounding us, somewhat like a capsule. This invisible line marks our limits, where we end and the rest of the world begins. When our boundaries are well defined, we can express and take responsibility for what we think, what we feel, and what we do. We rely on our inner selves in making decisions and choices. While having boundaries or shields is important in defining ourselves, we must also be able to connect with others through the boundaries. I'm going to read that last sentence again. While having boundaries or shields is important in defining ourselves, we must also be able to connect with others through the boundaries. The way we do this can be visualized as having a zipper on the inside of a shield. It can be unzipped for closeness or zipped tight for protection and withdrawal. This internal zipper can be opened when our screen or boundary is respected, when our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are validated as okay. Children who receive this validation of their personal uniqueness and their full range of feelings grow up in charge of their own zippers and feel they control their capacity for intimacy. People who have grown up in addicted families have experienced many assaults on their boundaries. When a person is unzipped, he or she feels violated. For example, intellectual invasion is the result of mind control when someone tells us what we think or should think. Emotional invasion refers to people who emotionally dominate others, resulting in loving down rather than loving across intimacy. Also, emotional invasions happen when some too caring people take care of other family members by sponging up their feelings Examples of physical boundary invasion are incest, battering, aggressive touch, or sexual affection. Our boundaries protect us intellectually, emotionally, and physically. As adults, we develop our boundaries by respecting ourselves and by setting limits with others. We should be flexible in saying no and saying yes. We should be honest with ourselves and others. We need to feel comfortable in our openness with others. Know and respect what we like, and teach others how to treat us. Many people who formed identities through dependency and fusion with others, allowing others to think for them or tell them what they feel, find that developing boundaries is essential for growth. Without boundaries, there is no clear identity, and without an identity, we cannot have intimacy. Intimacy is best achieved when two people enter a relationship as two separate whole selves. We're on the middle of page 9. This goes up to page 18 or less. I think that's a good place to start. I think that's very timely. And like I said, I haven't ever read this before, but I think it's valuable. I think it's very valuable. And I hope you enjoyed the reading. I hope it benefits you. And I hope these kinds of teachings can help us in our human family. If you like this, please PayPal, my PayPal, if you like it. I do survive on the work that I do on the planet. And so appreciate being here. Thank you.